Hello, this is James Barkell and you are listening to the Coach Doctor podcast. This is part 2 of my conversation with Professor Shane Pill. In part 1 we discussed the role of playing games instead of using one-dimensional training drills that require little or no decision making, the importance of making games-based approach purposeful and providing meaningful learning opportunities, and the importance of utilising a certain amount of struggle to learn and develop. In this episode we discuss the power of games to develop a fully engaged athlete and the role game sense plays in Australian physical education and coaching. You've worked or consulted across the world from Australia, New Zealand throughout Asia, America and a number of countries in Europe. Do you find this form of coaching is accepted around the globe, and is the application of the game sense methods coaching similar from country to country, or do you find there's some countries that really take it on board and have done a really good job with it, and some countries that you might not want to talk about, but some countries that probably don't take it on so much because they're, I guess, by nature very much sort of drill orientated? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, a very wise person said to me that a coach shouldn't go in and assert their culture on another country's culture. It's a recipe for disaster if the coach comes in and tries to assert their country's culture on another country's culture. Now, to give you an example, in Australia, we have a high wage economy. Therefore, we don't manufacture very much in Australia anymore. And about a decade or more ago, we pivoted towards being a service and a knowledge economy. A service and a knowledge economy requires different cognitive skill sets than a manufacturing economy. So therefore, we've encouraged innovation, creativity, synthesis, evaluation, these high-end cognitive operations that lead to innovation. And that's where our strength as a country lies, is in that new ideas. In another country where their education system is set up for a different outcome, they're emphasising different relationships and different ways of thinking. So if you go into a country where they are socialized to go, no, you're the expert, you tell me, that's your role. And it's a matter of respect that they expect you to tell them, because you're the person who has spent a long time acquiring the knowledge. You are the expert, you impart that expertise, and they're very comfortable with being told what to do. And it's a mark of respect to listen and carry it out to the best of your ability. It therefore is not going to be compatible to come straight in and go, right, let's ask a whole heap of questions and do some inquiry and be very athlete-centered and player-empowered. That's going to have to be a process of working towards that if you believe that that is what's going to get the best effect for the team. A mate of mine described it as, if you're an orange culture and it's a yellow culture, you don't go and try and force the orange on the yellow, and it goes the other way too. No, you don't try and force the yellow onto the orange. Over a period of time, you've got to try and blend them together, not force one to dominate over the other. I like the idea that I've gleaned from Aboriginal pedagogy, that it's about trying to create the cultural intersection, and it's actually a matter of weaving the ideas together, not asserting one idea on the other. So that's part of the cultural complexity when you go to various countries. The other aspect of it is that I don't think it's a country by country. It's often a sport by sport, and it's driven by the iconic coaches. And I used Alistair Clarkson as an example in Australian football. And whoever's in the lead coach development role in that country. Now, for example, in America, lacrosse has developed some fantastic game-based resources. Hockey has developed some fantastic game-based resources, both ice hockey and field hockey. Soccer has developed fantastic game-based resources and pushed the game practice play model, which is pretty much the tactical games model, as their preferred coaching approach. In Australia, you go to the Sport Australia website, and sitting up there under the Playing for Life philosophy is the game sense approach, the physical literacy strategy, and the sporting schools approach. So the game sense approach is still the the profiled methodology, pedagogy for junior sport when you go to the Sport Australia website. But are the people who are in charge of coach education aware of that? And are they knowledgeable enough to be able to translate that into practice in their sport? That's the key to unlocking the dissemination of the ideas. But in the early 1990s, it was recognised that if we want more kids to be more active more often through the vehicle of sport, we need to work with what motivates kids to participate in sport, and that's to play the game. Some kids love coming to training, but the majority of kids go to training because the coach says no train, no game. They're not coming to training because they're jumping out of their skins to come to training. But they could jump out of their skins to come to training if training was a game. And when we talk to adults, when we talk to kids, and we ask what was your most fabulous training session in your career, they talk about, okay, this comes to mind. I was talking to an ex-league footballer. Tell me your most fabulous training session in your career. He said, it was the night the coach was pissed off with us after a bad loss. And so he decided to play a scrimmage, full-on internal practice match. So it was the best training session we had all year because we got to play the game.
Yeah.
Players want to play.
And that's at the elite level, is it?
And that was at the semi-professional level. Yeah.
Okay.
The players want to play. Kids have told us conclusively they want to touch the ball, they want to score goals. Right? They don't want to wait in a line for a turn. Another coach that I worked with says we need to think about this brain. He said, I want a brain that sustains itself in the game. If my practice has people going to the back of the line, switching off, and then turning on again when it's their turn, I don't want them thinking in a game, I'm waiting for my turn. I want them hungry for the ball. I want them looking for every opportunity. That brain has to be totally engaged in the game for the time that they're on the park. So my practice session has to have that brain totally engaged for the time that they're on the park and not providing opportunities for it to switch off. Otherwise, I'm training their brain to do something different at practice to what I'm expecting on game day.
Yeah, that's a great way of explaining it. I really like that. Is there a country that you feel do it really well from both grassroots to that high performance level that you think Australia could learn off?
I don't want to judge on the limited experiences that I've had through travels. I mean, they've given me an insight into what's occurring. I would only say that colleagues of mine have said that in physical education, first of all, Australia tends to be having a different conversation around education to perhaps what some other countries are. And one colleague who's worked in Australia and New Zealand said, Australia's 10 to 15 years ahead of conversations we're having in this country. And I don't think it's right to say which country it was, but it was another Western country, English-speaking country. And I think that's right. Our education conversation in Australia is very much around what the science tells us about teaching for effective learning. All of our curriculums have been based on evidence of effective learning. Going back to the productive pedagogies work, which led into the quality teaching framework in New South Wales, every state and territory in Australia curriculum is directed by the science of teaching for effective learning. Very few countries have that background theoretical robustness informing their elaboration of the curriculum into practice. Their professional development of teachers to take that translation of the curriculum into practice, as we do in Australia. And that starts in our teacher education with our students, where we bring in the teaching for effective learning, quality pedagogy, productive pedagogy, various ways of describing it, and bring that framework around quality teaching through teaching for effective learning as an ideology into our teacher education programs right from day one. So we've got a robustness here in the theoretical backroom that's not always apparent in other jurisdictions, especially those jurisdictions that haven't developed common curriculum frameworks. Now, yep, of course, New South Wales, Victoria, Western Australia have all translated the curriculum because it needs to have their badge on it. But the front end of it and the substance of it is pretty much identical everywhere. It goes back to the parent document, the Australian Curriculum for Health and PE. The curriculum standards frameworks of the late 1990s, early 2000s, they were all variations of the curriculum standards framework called statements and profiles. The curriculum progression in movement and participation, if we just look at the physical education part of it, it's pretty consistent in every curriculum framework everywhere in the world. I mean, it goes from fundamental movement skills into movement sequences, into specialised applications, into the ability to provide advice, feedback and coaching to others so that you can be self-determined and self-regulated in your ability to learn and continue to learn, to be physically active throughout life. Every curriculum in the world follows the same pattern. That's physical education. It's also pretty much the same pattern in a sports coaching setting as well. So I don't think there's anywhere that does it better than Australia. There might be jurisdictions, there might be clubs, there might be individual sports for a period of time. Like I was really impressed by the leadership of Laurie Woodman when he was at the AFL and what he was doing at the National Coaches Conference. It had a clear direction on encouraging more kids to stay in the game by making the game the focus of coaching, which means being a game-based coach. And he had lots of sessions at the National Coaching Conference on that. And I've been really impressed by the work of Tennis Australia in the development of their resources through the work of Rebecca McDonald and Mitch Hewitt, which again has been about, we want kids to play the game. What's at the heart of tennis? A rally. Well, you can only have a rally if you're playing a game.
Yeah.
So let's make it game-based.
Yeah. No, fantastic.
We should be really proud of the work that we're doing in Australia, and the fact that so many of our coaches work internationally and are sought internationally means that we're doing something right in this country in the way that we think about our athletes. And part of that is also because Australian coaches tend to be highly relational. They're concerned about the individual as a human as well as a player. And so that relational aspect shouldn't be underestimated in the strength of Australian coaching as well. Yeah, definitely. In terms of, I guess, for PE teachers, any PE teachers listening, and I know a lot of PE coaches are PE teachers and vice versa, how do you see an effective way of reporting on those outcomes for students using that game sense model? Is there an idea around that? Yeah, so in sport, I reckon we would agree, I hope we would agree, the gold standard in assessment is quantitative. So you've got your statistics, and you've got a statistical framework, you're gathering data on that framework, and then you turn it into a qualitative piece by translating that into this is what it means for your practice, and you start coaching it. But in physical education teaching, teachers have been conditioned to look for the rubric, look for the description. With that introduction in mind, there are tools developed by Grahanya, the team sport assessment procedure, Grahanya and his colleagues, and by Stephen Mitchell, Linda Griffin, Judith Oslin in America through the tactical games model, the game performance assessment instrument, that enable PE teachers to do that quantitative analysis to provide very specific performance information on game development to individuals. In one of the last books I helped publish, Perspectives on Game-Based Coaching, Steve Harvey wrote a chapter with Matthew Pomeroy, who explained how he uses a team sport assessment procedure in his grade 7 physical education class, and explained it through a badminton unit. I've got a PhD student at the moment who's a physical education teacher in Melbourne, who started off with the hypothesis that we needed an Australian version of a game performance assessment instrument, but found that teachers didn't want it. They wanted a rubric. And he's going, where do I go to now? Because Now, industry standard is a game performance assessment instrument, but teachers are wanting a rubric. And so that caused a bit of a pivot in thinking as we go through. So there are tools that we can use to bring game performance analysis into physical education. A game-based approach is about an authentic experience of the game and making the game the context. And we've got assessment tools that will enable us to do that have been developed from the game-based perspective. The research tells us that students from grade 5 onwards, if taught to self-evaluate using these tools, can do it to a higher degree of effectiveness. So it's not necessarily about the teacher having to put this codification across all the kids. It could be about teaching the kids to be able to do it themselves. So I know some teachers who every lesson is video. The students have to watch the video, code their performance, set their performance improvement target, and then communicate to the PE teacher what their performance improvement target is next lesson. And then in that next lesson, the teacher is talking to the student about how they're going with their performance improvement target. I reckon that's really powerful education.
Yeah, that's really, really powerful, I think.
Now, in terms of communicating that, one of the best examples that I saw was back in the late 1990s, and a primary school in South Australia was set up as what was called a discovery school, leading edge technology. They were using an old Microsoft program, I think called KidsPix. And so what would happen was the parent would come in and the teacher would play a video, and the video would be a student selected clip from a PE class. And the student was explaining that clip and why that clip was evidence of their grade. This is a primary school. So, these are kids, I think they were doing that with their grade 4, 5, 6, and 7. So what's that? 9-year-olds to 13-year-olds were doing it. Now, in sport in South Australia, and I'm sure it's in your context too, in state leagues, kids in the elite development programs at under 15s, 16s, 17s, 19s, 18s are watching their vision. It's being coded by champion data, and the students are expected to watch their vision before they come and have a development conversation, let's use a different language, an educational conversation with their line coach. That's what we should be doing in PE.
Yeah, no, it's a really...
That's industry standard.
Yeah.
And it's really good educational practice. And I'm not having a conversation with you if you haven't watched your vision, because we've got nothing to talk about if you haven't watched your vision and coded your vision. So, we're really clear, just like we are in sport, where we don't try and work on everything, because then we get cognitive overload and we don't end up developing anything. We hone in on, this is our development target, what we're honing in on improving. And once we get that so that it's at a performance standard, we then go into maintenance of that and move on to our next performance improvement target. That's what we should be doing in PE. We should be able to say to our kids, here you are in your journey. Here's what your performance improvement target in PE is. Here's what we're doing to help you develop that. Here's what's in maintenance that we need to keep revisiting so it stays up to standard. That's just good practice. That's industry standard in sport. And that's how we get people to have confidence in their competence, because I feel I've got the capability to play. So I think there's an opportunity to move away from what the research has told us is clearly a failed model of physical education, which is give lots of experiences and hope that something sticks and they'll go and do it. Hope is not good enough for a professional. Hope is not good enough as an educational practice. Now, we need to be deliberately designing for outcomes and putting opportunities in place for our kids that the movement competencies that they're developing in PE have direct application outside of the PE class, because there's opportunities provided by the school to put them into practice, or there's opportunities in the community to put them into practice. If there's no opportunities through the school to put them into practice, or the community to put them into practice, we've given them experience, but not an education. Right? There is no translation beyond the school gate. And I've lost track of the number of times I've said it in assembly. And I'm not picking on badminton, but I'm just using this as an example because it's a minor sport. I said, how many of you teach badminton? 90% of the hands go up. I love teaching badminton myself. Well, where's your local badminton club? And the PE teacher's got no idea. Chances are there probably isn't a local badminton club in their area. And I'll be going, how many of you offer a school sport program in badminton? Very few of them do that. So I said, when are these kids ever going to choose to do badminton in their life beyond the school gate? If there's no community clubs, no community social clubs, and your school's not offering a program. And now I look outside the gym, you got 8 tennis courts. Does every child at your school finish by the end of year 10 feeling confident in their competence to go out and have a hit of tennis? Because you've got this fantastic resource out there. And most people have tennis courts within walking distance of their home in Australia.
Yeah.
I mean, the more we try to do, the less we achieve.
How would we, I guess, do that effectively, knowing that teachers might be time poor?
Yeah, and there's certainly more administration and auditing and compliance measures now than what there were when I started teaching in the 80s. But as a science or a maths teacher, I've got my quantified results, and I can tell you where the kids are in their development. And I know through my own kids' school, some of the most impressive teachers when I went to teacher interview, the maths, science, and English teachers, they would be able to talk about a concept and where in the continuum of development my child was in that concept. As a science teacher, the concept of cell theory is introduced in reception. We're all made of cells and we start building cells with plasticine. That idea of cell theory is developed every year through to year 12 biology. It's not done in year 1 and then left for a couple of years. We'll come back to it in year 5. Whereas in PE, we somehow seem to think we will develop competence and therefore the confidence to be physically active by giving an experience in grade 5 and then not doing it again for 2 or 3 years and then coming back to it 3 years later and wondering why the kids are still beginners.
Yeah.
So physical education becomes a site where those kids who have the opportunity to develop competencies in community sport programs where they are getting the volume of practice that provides the competence development and therefore the confidence to pursue it, get recognised. So PE becomes talent identification.
Yeah. No.
And we've all done PE training, and volume of practice is one of the first things we get taught. If you want to be good at something, whether it be doctor, dentist, lawyer, or badminton player, you've got to put the volume in to become good at it.
Yeah.
So therefore, from a logical programming perspective, the starting point for a physical education program for me in secondary school is, what do we want these kids to be good at by the time they finish school? They can't be good at everything. What choices are we going to make? And to me, we involve the kids in those discussions. What are their interests? What's life like beyond the school gate?
Yeah.
And so, gold standard, we might have our recreational program for PE, which has got those kids that we just want lifelong participation in movement. And then we've got those kids who are really serious about sport as a pathway. Well, they need a different type of PE program. They're not fixed pillars. They need to be jump in, jump out points, because kids will change. Kids will grow, kids will develop, kids will change their pathways. So jump in, jump out points need to be built into the system. But if every kid is doing the exact same phys ed program, we're assuming that at the end of year 10, every kid's got the same endpoint.
Yeah. And it's probably the one subject where there's so many disparities between, a top level athlete and a bottom level, I don't know how you call it an athlete, but you raise some really pertinent points and ideas. Thanks for that. Shane, just before we go, I know you've published quite a few resources. I'm not sure if you were able to just quickly tell our listeners some of the books. I know you talked about Play with Purpose, and I know you've got some specifically for different sports, some of the things you might have. And I know that if some of our listeners might be interested in what you've been talking about, might be likely to go out and find some of those resources to help them with their coaching.
I appreciate the opportunity. One of the things, something I'm really excited about is we've got a book called The Spectrum of Coaching Styles, which will come out late November this year, where we've translated Mostyn's spectrum of teaching styles specifically into sports coaching language, so that there is that spectrum of teaching styles, the toolkit that we talked about before. Yep. And we've used research from sports coaching to talk about each of the coaching styles to go through. Because, a coach will look at it and go, oh, that's a PE book. So they won't look at the concept. So we wanted to put Mostyn's spectrum of teaching styles into a form that coaches would go, oh, that's me. I'm a coach. I'm going to take this and have a look at it, so that we move away from this language that this practice is bad and that practice is good, and go, when is the right time to use that practice? When is the wrong time to use that practice? Because all practices can be used for a particular purpose. So knowing the purpose that the practice suits is the starting point, rather than going, no. Direct instruction is wrong. No. Command is wrong. Well, actually, no. If I need to keep a high level of safety, like I'm doing some scrum drills in rugby, I'm going to be doing a lot of direct instruction because I've got to keep my players safe. Safety is my first priority. I'm not going to go and let them discover how to bind. I'm going to be directly teaching them how to bind. Yep. And directly teaching them how to bind is the most appropriate thing, because if I let them discover it and the scrum collapses and someone does their vertebrae, sorry, that's my fault. I've got no defense. I'm not going to go to a book and say, oh, I'm doing discovery pedagogy. Sorry, no, wrong choice.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Really good ideas there. Yeah. Good. Nice.
So that's something that, quite excited about, working with Mitch Hewitt, Brendan Susi, and a colleague at Flinders of mine, Joss Rankin, on spectrum of coaching styles. A lot of people have said that the last book, Perspectives on Game-Based Coaching, has been really useful for their professional development and given them insights not just into game-based coaching as it's been, but also some of the new directions in game-based coaching, such as Amy Price's translation of James Gee's video game pedagogy into sports coaching, and the immersive scenarios that Ruan and his colleagues in the UK have been working with, immersive practice scenarios. I did some work on athlete-centered coaching. Athlete-centered coaching, I was really inspired by the work of Lynn Kidman and reading about the work that the All Blacks were doing, and had the opportunity to put together this book and provide a great professional development for me and a language for me that helps understand the socio-emotional work that we do as coaches and how important that piece is. My colleague Deb Agnew works in the transition space, in particular interested in elite athletes' transition to retirement or transition from top grade into state leagues, etc., and the mental health challenges that many athletes face, losing their identity as an athlete and becoming something else post their playing career. And the athlete-centered coaching model, where we're helping people develop, first of all, as people, that notion that better people make better clubs, make better communities, make better players. I thought that's really what attracts me to coaching, is the relational piece, and the athlete-centered coaching gave me a framework to think about that relational piece that I really like. So the Perspectives on Athlete-Centered Coaching is a book that I really enjoyed working with the contributors to get the insights across the globe on the translation of the ideas. And the Play with Purpose book surprised me. Jeff Emmel was looking to publish a resource for ACHPA. He'd come to a professional development session. I was giving out like a 30-page handout, and he said to me, have you ever thought about turning that handout into a book? And I hadn't. And he encouraged me to turn that 30-page handout into the first Play with Purpose resource for middle and secondary school PE, and Jeff Emmel is the one that got me going on the publication of resources, and that then turned into a second edition with some ideas that came out of my PhD on taking the game sense model and developing it into the concept of sport literacy, so that we've got the functional translation of sport knowledge into how we flourish as an individual in life, in community, so communities are better and we can have more informed sport debates as a consequence. And then I was asked to do some resources, so I did the AFL Play with Purpose resource, and that was being used by the SANFL here as its textbook for all level 1 coaching courses for a number of years. And then I did the netball one, Play with Purpose netball, Play with Purpose soccer/football. And then the last one that I did that was published was Play with Purpose for rugby league, rugby union, and touch. A couple of years ago, I was asked to do a lacrosse resource by some people in the United States, but the contract fell through after I did the resource. So I'm pretty sure on my ResearchGate site, people can download Play with Purpose for lacrosse coaching as well as a free resource.
Okay, that's good. Well, Shane, thanks so much for coming on tonight. I know it's been almost been on for over an hour and a half, so I really appreciate your time and some of your insight into game sense for both coaching and PE teachers as well. I know that a lot of people will take a lot out of it. I've got some of those publications you just talked about, and they're fantastic. They're fantastic books for, I guess, professional development for myself. And I know, as I said to you earlier on, one of my friends has just recently bought one as well. So thank you so much. There's probably some other ones there I'll put on my Christmas list as well. So again, thanks so much for coming on tonight. Just quickly before we leave, if any of our listeners want to follow you, I know you're quite productive on LinkedIn. Is there any other social media sites that people could follow you in terms of finding out some of your information or some of your publications and those sorts of things?
Now, I've got a closed, so you just knock on the door and I screen whether you can come in. Site Twitter at Pilly66. So my LinkedIn site and my Twitter site are linked.
Yep.
But the Twitter site is locked, so I screen who can come in. That was because there was some, as you know, Twitter can be a space where not everybody that comes in wants to engage positively. So that's a protective mechanism that a lot of people do just to find out whether it's a bot that wants to follow you or whether it's an actual person that wants to follow you. And then, of course, through Flinders University, if you Googled Shane Pill, Flinders University, that'll take you to my Flinders University homepage, and there's a hyperlink there to email me, to be able to contact me directly via email at Flinders University.
Fantastic. All right. So thanks so much for your time tonight, Shane. I've really, really appreciate it. It's been fantastic and some really good listening. So thank you so much.
Hopefully one day we'll be able to do it face-to-face over a coffee rather than virtually.
That would be fantastic. So that concludes our chat with Professor Shane Pill. He was amazing to chat to and gave over 2 hours of his valuable time. If game sense coaching is something you've been thinking about doing in your sport but scared to take the leap because it can look messy and frantic, don't worry, just have a go. Whether you coach kids or adult athletes, all ages love and most usually want to play. So start the session with a game, mix things up. And as you get more confidence coaching under this model, add to it. Remember, as Shane says, there should be a purpose to what you're playing and there should be learning outcomes that you can get out of some of these games. Good luck and may the games be with you.